Is it actually worth it to shell out your hard-earned money to buy an expensive wallet, or are you better off going with a cheaper wallet and keeping the change inside? Let's find out. So first up, how do we find cheap and expensive? That's relative, and you may have a different definition than we do, but for us, it's anything under $50 is cheap, and anything above $250 is expensive. Obviously, there are exceptions to a rule because sometimes you get designer wallets which have a high price tag for $500, $600, $700, $800, but the quality is more like one of $100. Fortunately, there's certain hallmarks that will help you to find a wallet that is of higher quality, no matter what the price is. In this video, we're really only discussing leather wallets, as that is the prime material for wallets. You can also have canvas wallets or vegan leather wallets, which is not real leather. It's just a plastic product that sooner or later will end up in a landfill. Actually, it's sooner than later. Now, these standards apply to all sorts of wallets. Coat wallets, bifold wallets, trifold wallets, card holders, and so forth. Now, different items have different specialties. For example, a card holder wallet is meant to be slim. So you want something that's slim. Will it hold the most cards? No. But that's not the point. You buy something for what you actually want in terms of functionality and usability. The first thing that distinguishes cheap wallets from expensive wallets is the materials and the differences in quality. The leather itself is the most important and most expensive ingredient of a leather wallet. So if you want to make a cheap wallet, you need cheap ingredients. If you want a cheaper leather, typically you get a leather that was tanned in a lower cost country, made with animals from a lower cost country. One thing you might see on a cheaper wallet is a stamp genuine leather. For the average consumer, that might imply that you actually get real leather rather than fake leather, but in reality, genuine leather is a very low bar to pass. Typically, it's produced to a subpar standard in lower cost countries. Now, can you feel and see the difference? Absolutely. If you show me a leather from Morocco, from Mexico, from China, or from India, and you show me something from Italy, from France, or from Germany, I can see the difference. Now the question is, how can you distinguish that? And we did a video about different types of leathers. Basically, the first big distinction is where are the hides or the skins from? For example, a quality leather is typically made from a calf skin or a bull hide. These bulls for quality leather come from an area where there's not many bug bites, so it could be from the Alps or could be areas in England, for example, where there's not many scars, so you get a nice leather where you can use the full grain side that is uncorrected, and then finished, which is tanned in a nice way all the way through, which is also known as aniline dye, and it is finished with waxes and oils in a way that you want it to be. Now, a cheap leather, on the other hand, is not the top part of the grain, but it is often a split leather, which means the leather is literally cut in half, and the bottom layer, which is not as desirable, is then sanded and then finished with a layer of PU coating or something else to make it look nice, but over time it won't wear well, it will age poorly, and it will look terrible. Sometimes you even have leather fiber materials where they use leather and they reconstitute it and they glue it together in a certain way. This is not something that you want, and no one would ever use that material for quality's sake. It's simply because it's cheap and you can basically create the impression that it's a good product when in reality it's garbage. Literally, this is like leather cardboard and the chicken nuggets of leather. And I don't have to tell you that we don't want that in our wallets. Sometimes when you see a grain leather on a cheaper wallet, it's typically debossed, meaning you use a stamp, you grain correct the surface, and then just put the stamp on the leather with some heat and you get that pattern. On the flip side, an expensive wallet will likely have a grain that is naturally shrunk. So the skin or the hide were naturally untreated, so it's a full grain leather, but then through the tanning process and the finishing, you can make it shrink and get that effect. Because of that, the pattern is unique to each individual skin and hide, and it is not the same. So if you look at the wallet, on the inside, on the outside, you can see there are different sizes. And of course, when we cut it, you want it to look uniform and pleasant. For example, at Fort Belvedere, we use a leather that's called a Togo leather. And at first glance, you might think it was debossed, but it was not. It is a shrunken calf leather that is really, really nice. And it's used by other brands like Hermes, for example, to make really nice and expensive wallets and other leather goods. The other material that's typically in a wallet is the interlining, which can be cheap polyester, or it can be something like a moire. It's extremely thin, extremely durable, and you can edge treat it in a way that it doesn't fray. So that can be super helpful. The other thing you need in terms of material is a thread, of course, and you typically want something that is nylon and very resistant. And then you can have the interlinings. On a cheap wallet, you will get a cheap interlining. It can be sometimes be something like cardboard that once you bend a corner will never recover, or you can have an interlining that is stiff, that keeps the shape of the leather, but is flexible enough to make it feel very pleasant, which is typically what you get on an expensive wallet. Expensive wallets also have certain features, sometimes like RFID blocking technology. Like on our Fort Belvedere wallets, we added that. It's a thin layer on the outside to protect your cards from data being stolen. Cheaper wallets may claim to have this technology too, but I'm not sure how much I trust its ability to work well. Also, in a cheaper wallet, you get this cheap polyester interlining. It sounds very cheap, and it also doesn't stand the test of time. Typically, a cheaper wallet won't tell you much about the leather, where it's from. On an expensive wallet, they will typically highlight at least what country it's from. Sometimes they'll even share the specific tannery. Now, tanneries are typically companies that can do a range of different qualities. And when you buy something, you don't necessarily know to what level it was tanned or dyed. That being said, a lot of companies focus on a certain segment of the market. So if it's a well-known tannery, you can expect a higher quality item. At Fort Belvedere, when we design a wallet, we want to create something that stands the test of time so you can wear your wallet for 10, 20 years or even longer. For that reason, we only choose really high-end, top-notch leather, calf leathers, or bull hide leathers. We don't go with cowhide. We want the bull because the quality is better. We don't have to worry about has this bull given birth or not, because he simply doesn't. There's also other leathers like deerskin, which can be rather soft, but by combining the leather with the right interlining, you can pretty much make most leathers work, at least if you're a skilled manufacturer. When it comes to exotic leathers, cheap wallets may have something that looks like crocodile or alligator or ostrich, but in reality, it's just a cowhide that is probably split leather that's grain corrected and then embossed. Even if it was full grain cowhide, it's typically not the best quality. On an expensive wallet, and that will usually run you in the $600, $700, $800, $1,000, you get alligator or crocodile, which are protected by CTES. And if you want to learn more about the process and why it's so expensive, check out this video. Also, a cheap wallet will most likely not be veg tanned, because veg tan in general is a little more of an expensive process. Now, there are veg tan leathers which are not great, but there are no veg tan leathers that are really junk. On the flip side, 99% of all leather is chrome tanned, and there's a lot of garbage leather that is chrome tanned, but you can also have a high quality leather that is chrome tanned. Expensive wallets typically will likely have leathers from renowned European tanneries. Cheaper wallets, on the other hand, will not use those leathers. They will typically come from countries like, India or China, Brazil, Mexico, Nicaragua, and so forth. Now, in theory, you can make great quality products anywhere, but time and time again, I've seen that in areas where they've specialized in things for centuries, you're more likely to get a higher quality output. Now, a really expensive wallet will sometimes have a lining made of leather. But if you split leather really thin, and for a lining you want it to be really thin, sometimes it can lose its integrity and rib and not be durable. There are certain leathers, like kangaroo leather, which can be split really thinly, and you can add them to really high-end wallets, but those will be very, very expensive wallets. Also, there are legal issues with it. For example, in the state of California, you can't import any goods with kangaroo leather. So if you're an American company and you want to sell wallets that have a kangaroo lining, you run into issues there. A cheaper wallet will never have a true leather lining because it costs too much, and that's not something that they can offer. That being said, you can use other materials, such as cotton. You can use a polyester, you can use nylon, but ultimately you want the function of something that's really thin and really durable. At Fort Belvedere, we use as much leather as we can in a wallet, and it's 2.5 times to 3 times more leather than a regular wallet. Because of that, the whole wallet is more expensive, which makes sense. So the more leather you see in a wallet, the higher the chances that it is a high quality, expensive wallet. The more lining you see on the inside, the more likely it is to be a cheap wallet. Also, on expensive wallets, you will find leathers that will develop a nice patina and age beautifully over time. Cheap wallets will never have materials that age well and patina well over time. They just look older and worse with use, versus the expensive wallets may look better with use. Now, the second big thing that distinguishes cheap from expensive wallets is the construction of the wallet. At first glance, they may all look alike, but a cheap wallet will have cut edges that are either unfinished or maybe edge painted in certain cases, but that's about a spectrum that you can expect. An expensive wallet, if it has cut edges with a wedge tan leather, it will probably be burnished, which is a process that takes a while, but it finishes off the pores and it will age nicely. A cheap wallet will have a few layers of edge paint and they will crackle off and look bad over time. An expensive wallet with edge painting will have multiple layers in different colors and it will wear much differently. At Fort Belvedere, we even went a step ahead and we did folded edges, not just single folded edges, but double folded edges. What does that mean? You literally cut and skive the ends of the leather, then you fold them over so you have a full kind of layer of leather that's touching the outside, and that's the most durable form of a wallet construction. To keep prices down, a cheap wallet will often be constructed in a way where the sewing is straightforward and easy, so it can be made in a short amount of time and the cost can be low. With an expensive wallet, you will get something that's a little more outside the box and it's more difficult to achieve. And in reality, if you work in a factory, you typically can train your workers to either focus on the quality and create a quality product, or they can make something cheaply and quickly. But it's hard for a factory owner to tell the workers, hey, for this client, make it high end. For this client, just try to pump it through, because typically they need very different specializations. For example, something that may not be very obvious, but if you use a contrast stitching in your wallet, you need really skilled artisans, because as you sew them with a machine, you just see one side, you can't see it from the bottom, and if you use a contrast thread, every little mistake is very visible. If you stitch tone in tone, it is likely not visible even if you make a mistake. So on a cheap wallet, you will never see a contrast tone stitching that is really neat. On an expensive wallet, you may see that. You may also see tone in tone, but it's a slight way where you can distinguish a cheap wallet from an expensive wallet. Also, if you take a look at the workmanship, the more expensive wallet will be super neat. Everything is folded very properly. The leather is cut very precisely. On a cheaper wallet, as you look there, you can see, oh, the stitching is crooked. You can see the cutting is not very nice. The finishing is not very nice, because that's not the point. They just want to crank out something quickly and inexpensive. Cheaper wallets will typically also have things like card slots that are just cut into the leather. A more expensive wallet will have dedicated folded edges or edge paint things in more unusual patterns sometimes too. An expensive wallet will have special features such as RFID, or they will have smart cutouts in a card holder, for example, so you can push out your cards and it's very functional. On a cheaper wallet, they may have these features, but often it's not as thought through. So the card slots may be a little too wide, or it's just not very functional. If you invest a lot of money in expensive material, it doesn't make sense to skimp on the production cost. So you will rarely find a wallet that has really nice leather and very shoddy workmanship. Usually, the quality of materials and the quality of the workmanship go hand in hand. Now, how are cheap wallets different from expensive wallets in terms of durability? If you have a cheaper leather that was top coated and edge painted in a cheap way, they will age much more quickly and it won't look as nice anymore. So you have to throw it away because you can't repair it, and then you just have to go and buy another one. So the cost per use, even though the initial price is low, is not super low. On the flip side, if you get an expensive wallet that might cost 5, 6, 7 times as much as a cheap wallet, because you can wear it, 10 years, 20 years versus maybe 1 or 2 years on a cheaper wallet, you actually get a lower cost per use or cost per day. And you have something that feels nice when you have it in your hand, and it will just look more beautiful with a nice patina. Oftentimes on a cheaper wallet, they didn't quite understand what backing material I had to use for this particular leather, and so it won't stay in shape as nicely as an expensive wallet which had paired the leather with the right lining material. There's a lot of expertise in this that you as a consumer will never see, but the manufacturer knows that kind of stuff. Now, how are cheap wallets different than expensive wallets when it comes to functionality and design? So for a cheap wallet, you start out typically with copying a different design, because that doesn't require any R&D cost. You just take something that's already there, you knock it off, and there you go. The cheapest way to create your product. With expensive products, you have the ability to actually say, well, what is the function that we want? Do we want this wallet to be super thin? Do we want it to hold lots of cards? Do we want it to have a lot of leather? What is it that you want? And you can design a wallet accordingly. Now, not all companies that sell expensive wallets do that, but at least there's a possibility for that. For the same reason, we chose the exact right radius for the corners, so it looks as square as possible, but with the right radius, it just doesn't catch on anything and it's very functional. On a cheaper wallet, you don't have that level of design and R&D in a product, so it will just be more clunky, and every time you put it into your pocket, it will be hard to get it out, and you just have to deal with that. Also, the cheaper the wallet, the more plastic items you will see in it. Sometimes it can be like a plastic ID window, but I've found that typically you can never actually see the ID through these, so you have to take the card out anyways. And often this is the material that will crack the soonest and age most quickly. So on a more expensive wallet, you will likely not see any cheap ID windows. It's typically all quality leather. Also on cheaper wallets, you typically get a bulkier wallet. Because the materials are not as good, they can't be split as thinly, and they may have extra compartments, a trifold, a zipper pocket. And realistically, if someone steals your wallet, they will probably take your whole wallet. A zipper pocket will not protect you in any way. Sometimes also the product isn't maybe designed for the right market. I grew up in Germany, and there most men have a bifold wallet with a coin purse, because you have coins with a higher denomination, so it somewhat makes sense. In the US, you don't have coins of a high value in general circulation, and so people generally do not have a coin purse. So you just take the product with a coin purse and offer it in the US. That's just not useful. So cheap wallets are typically just knocked off in their design. There's nothing original to them. Expensive wallets usually have more useful features, and you get a product that is more thought out. When it comes to style, cheaper wallets can often be more trendy and fashion forward, whereas expensive wallets are often very classic and more timeless. Now, one thing that is often overlooked with wallets is the degree of product testing, and to make sure that materials are really good and do what they're supposed to do. With a cheaper wallet, oftentimes that's not the case, and sometimes they get something wrong and then they can't sell it and have to throw away the entire batch. If you have high labor costs and high material costs, mistakes like that would be even more costly. So typically, a higher end wallet brand will do more testing and ensure that their product stands up to everyday use. At Fort Belvedere, for example, before we produced the first wallets, we had like a total of 30 prototypes, right? Different colors, different leathers. And I remember the first leather that we really loved and touched. It felt great, it looked great, it smelled great. But once we used it as a wallet over time, we noticed that it developed kind of a hazy patina, and it really didn't look nice anymore. So we didn't want that, so we didn't bring this product to production. If we had been a cheaper company and we just wanted to pump something out that looks good on the first day, we would have gone with that. The customer would have gotten exactly what they wanted, but over time they would have gotten this hazy piece of leather wallet and they would have said, well, what is that, right? So when you buy a more expensive wallet, you ideally get a higher quality product that has been tested, so you get something good. But again, buyer beware. There are lots of luxury brands out there that have kind of deteriorated their product to a point where you really get a, subpar, below average product at an extremely high price point. So how can you protect yourself from that? Look at the hallmarks. Look for the aniline dyed leather from European tanneries. Look for the folded edges. Check how much leather they use. See, are they slimmer? Do they have certain features that are really good? Is it RFID blocking? Really dive deep into the product to understand what it is that you really get. At the end of the day, buying one wallet that lasts you 20 years is a much greener solution, much more sustainable solution than buying a new wallet every year or every 2 years. An expensive wallet made of a high quality material will look better over time, it will develop a patina, it will have a nice function, and overall, at the end of the day, will have a lower cost per use compared to a cheaper, inexpensive wallet. What are ways that you use to identify a cheap wallet or an expensive wallet? Please share with us in the comments.